So, if you've ever tried to learn a new language, you've probably heard the same advice over and over. Immerse yourself completely. Speak only in the language you're trying to learn. But what if that incredibly popular advice isn't just a little off? What if it's actually the very thing holding us back?
Just think about it for a second. Chances are you've been in that exact situation. Sitting in a language class, absolutely terrified to say a word, feeling like your own native language is some kind of forbidden crutch. The whole idea is that this sink or swim immersion is the fastest way to get fluent. But is it really? The data coming out of classrooms tells a very, very different story.
And this is where things get kinda strange. It brings us to what we can call the immersion classroom paradox. See, on one hand, it's easily the most popular method out there. But on the other hand, language learning in a lot of English-speaking countries is, well, it's actually on the decline. Let's take a look at the numbers.
Okay, so this number is pretty shocking. A 2020 study by Damping Wong found that in New Zealand, even with this huge interest in languages like Mandarin, only 1.4% of university students were actually enrolled in any international language program. There's this huge drop-off as students get older, and it turns out the immersion method itself might be a big part of the problem.
You know, this isn't even a new idea. Decades ago, researcher James Cummins warned that these super strict monolingual approaches can cause intense anxiety. I mean, when students are forbidden from using their own language to ask a simple question or to make sure they understand a really complex idea, their voices are basically muted. And that creates this high-stress, low-confidence environment that actually pushes students away from learning altogether.
So to really get to the bottom of this, we need to pull back the curtain on the core belief that's driving this whole target language only rule. It's an idea that's so deeply baked into our education system that we almost never stop to actually question it.
It all comes down to something called monolingual ideology. This is the basic idea that our brains have these neat, separate little boxes for each language, and that letting them mix is a bad thing. In this view, your first language isn't a tool, it's a problem. It's seen as a source of interference that you have to stamp out if you're ever going to learn a new language properly.
And here you can really see the two competing ideas for what a language classroom should be. The old-school monolingual approach sees your first language as a problem, which leads to this monologic classroom, basically a one-way street where the teacher just transmits information. But a totally different approach, translanguaging, sees that first language as an incredible resource, creating a dialogic classroom that's all about two-way conversation and real understanding.
And this isn't just theory. Listen to this quote from that Wang study. It shows you the real-world effect. Students are literally trained to feel bad about using their most natural cognitive tool. Researchers even have a name for this: translanguaging guilt. It's that feeling that you're somehow cheating or failing if you need to use your native tongue for a second. Okay, so if the old way is broken, what's the alternative? Well, the answer is a concept called translanguaging. And it's not just about mixing up languages, it's a complete reimagining of how our multilingual minds actually work.
Translanguaging sees all your language skills not as separate things, but as one big, integrated communication toolkit. It's the natural way bilinguals actually communicate in the real world, using their entire repertoire. We're talking not just words, but gestures, symbols, digital tools, everything at their disposal to understand and be understood. It's about leveraging everything you already know to learn something new.
And this is a really deep concept. As scholar Catherine Mazak points out, translanguaging isn't just a simple teaching trick. No, it's a whole new ideology that directly challenges that old monolingual view. It's a theory of how bilingual brains work, it's a stance teachers can take, and it's a set of real-world practices you can actually see in a classroom. And for the learner, it is absolutely transformational.
So what does this actually look like in practice? When we stop forbidding a student's first language and actually start welcoming it, we create what's called a translanguaging space. And believe me, the data on what students really want is fascinating.
The data from Wong's study on university students learning Chinese is just so surprising. You'd think advanced students would want 100% immersion, right? Nope. Turns out, across every single level, beginner, intermediate, and advanced, students felt the most comfortable when the target language was used between 40 and 60% of the time. They don't want to get rid of their first language, they actually rely on it to survive and to thrive.
And this quote from a student just gets right to the heart of it. When the teacher used a little bit of English to explain a tricky point, it didn't slow down the learning, it actually made it more efficient. And, even more importantly, it made the student feel less nervous.
It created a safe, low-anxiety space where real, deep learning could finally happen.
And this is more relevant now than ever in our digital world. A 2023 study by IB1AM and their colleagues found that in remote classes, students naturally create these translanguaging spaces. They use gestures on camera, they use digital tools like the chat function, they use symbols and emojis, they even pull up online dictionaries on their phones. They're using their full, multimodal repertoire to make meaning together.
And all of this brings us to what might be the most important philosophical shift of all. The goal of learning a new language shouldn't be to replace one language with another one. It should be about building on the amazing foundation that's already there.
This quote from scholar Li Wei, man, it just says it all. We're not trying to turn an English speaker into a Chinese monolingual. The goal is to help them become a confident, bilingual or multilingual person, to enrich the linguistic skills they already have, not to replace them.
And this powerful idea has a name. It's called additive bilingualism. This is the healthy, empowering model where a new language adds to, rather than subtracts from, a person's identity and skills. Your first language is the foundation you build on, not some wall you have to tear down.
So where does all this leave us? Well, the evidence is pretty clear that for way too long, we've been asking students to check their most valuable learning tool at the classroom door. It's time we started inviting all languages in.
By just shifting our perspective, by seeing a student's first language as a resource instead of an obstacle, we do something truly profound. We transform classrooms from places of anxiety into spaces of empowerment, where students can use everything they know to build new knowledge, lower their stress, and actually have genuine, meaningful conversations.
So I'll leave you with one final provocative thought to chew on. For generations, we've been looking for the perfect, magical method to teach a new language. But what if the most powerful tool we've ever had is the very language we've been trying so desperately to silence?